Hi everyone, welcome to a new patchwork video from Serendipity. I'm Jenny and today will be all about the foundation paper piecing method. It's a technique where you will sew your fabrics directly onto a paper template, sewing by numbers basically. And such a template usually looks something like this. And it gives you the chance to sew more complex patterns and motifs that are always identical and very precise. Here you can see a kaleidoscope block, which is a very good example for a classic patchwork block that works perfectly using this method. The paper piecing tutorial on our blog is the one that has by far the most hits, and since our first quilt along that will start very soon is all about foundation paper piecing, I wanted to show you a few more details. Here we go. Here you see my workspace with the tools I need, a patchwork ruler, the printed template, a pattern tracer, a pair of scissors, a fabric glue stick, a rotary cutter, and a cutting mat. You can see that the paper template is divided into different sections, and on the outside there's a dotted line which is your seam allowance. I start by roughly cutting out the template. Then I use the pattern tracer and the ruler to trace all lines that are dividing the different sections. And that will perforate the paper, which will help me to fold the lines between the sections. For the triangle block that I'm going to sew in this tutorial and that will be part of our quilt along, I have already prepared a few fabric strips. Of course, I'll start with section 1. And what is most important to remember with this technique is that you will sew your fabric to that side of the paper that does not have the printed template, and the left side of the fabric will face the paper. I am positioning the fabric 1 exactly behind section 1 on the template, and I make sure that I have at least a 1/4 inch seam allowance all around. You can check by lifting the paper a little bit or holding it against a light source like a window. When I'm happy with the position, I fold the paper back and use a little bit of fabric glue to make sure the fabric won't move until it's sewn to the paper. Next, I'll look for the line between sections 1 and 2, fold back the paper, and use my ruler and rotary cutter to cut off any excess fabric except for a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then I'll grab my fabric for section 2 and make sure that the fabric covers the whole section, including the seam allowance. I'll place the fabric on my mat, right side facing up, and position the fabric for section 1 on top with matching edges and right sides together. Once again, I make sure that I have enough seam allowance all around section 2. When I'm happy, I open the paper template up and sew exactly on the line between sections 1 and 2. I'm using a very short stitch length On my machine that's 1.5, so I'm perforating the paper again. After sewing, I turn the paper over so I can see the fabrics. I fold over the fabric of section 2 and smooth out the seam. If you have your iron close by, it's always best to press the seam. Then I turn the paper over again so I can see the printed template and repeat the process with section 3. I fold back the paper, cut off the excess fabric by positioning the 1/4-inch markings of the ruler along the edge of the paper so I get a clean edge to align my next fabric to. I grab my fabric for section 3, make sure that it covers the whole section including seam allowance, and place it below fabric number 2 with matching seams and right sides together. I open up the template and sew exactly along the line between sections 2 and 3. I turn over the paper, fold back the fabric of section 3 and press the seam. Now I fold the paper along the line to section 4 and cut off the excess fabric of the previous 3 sections. Then I'll place the fabric strip for section 4 behind the template, right sides together, and edges aligned at the top. I open up the template and sew along the line of section 4. Turn over the paper, open up the fabric number 4 and press the seam. Now we move on to the last section of this template. Fold over section 5, cut off the excess fabric, place the fabric for section 5 behind the template, right sides together and top edge aligned. Open up the template and sew along the line of section 5. Turn over the paper, open up the fabric for number 5 and press the seam. All sections are now done. Place the template with the printed side facing up onto your cutting mat and use your ruler and rotary cutter to trim the block by cutting exactly along the most outer line for the seam allowance. Your block is now finished and you can remove the paper template. That usually works best in reverse order. Carefully tear the paper along the seams as you would tear a sheet from a notebook. Don't pull it up, but pull sideways so you don't risk tearing your seams. Because you perforated the paper with a pattern tracer, folded it, and used a very short stitch length, this is quite easy to do. Section 1 usually sticks to the fabric due to that little spot of fabric glue, but if you pull gently, it comes off quite easily as well. And I'm always happy to see how clean the backside of these paper piecing blocks turn out. The block is all done and can be sewn onto other pieces. But I wanted to go back to one thing that a lot of you have problems with, and that is the correct placement of the pieces of fabric before you sew them on. When you have folded back the section of the paper template, and the next piece of fabric that you have placed behind the template covers this whole section, then this piece of fabric will also cover the section after you have sewn it and folded everything back up, no matter how odd the angle of this section is. That's it. That was my little tutorial about the foundation paper piecing method. And I really hope that it was useful to you and you see that this technique is actually quite easy and can be a lot of fun. In the description below, I will add a link to the tutorial on our blog, where you can find even more infos and tips, as well as a simple template for you to download and practice on. If you like, I will see you again in part 2 of this tutorial, where I will show you how to use freezer paper for this technique, which can save you some time and a lot of paper. Bye for now and see you soon.